Oh, my friends, we must speak today about the great events of old, of ancient conflicts where faith and fury intertwined. You are now watching the Cross and the Crescent. History doesn't always have to be dry, it can be thrilling. Heroes rise and fall, empires clash, and love conquers all. Well, maybe not that last one. When Godfrey of Bouillon seized Jerusalem in 1099, he found himself atop a mountain of gold, rubies, and silks, the spoils of the First Crusade. The Crusaders had come seeking God, not riches. So they left the administration of their new Holy Land conquest to a handful of nobles and bishops, then went home. Oh, but not before building a few churches on top of the Temple Mount and kicking out the Jews, not for the last time, mind you. It wasn't long before the Muslim rulers of Damascus and Egypt called in reinforcements. In 1118, a vizier named Zengi assembled an army near the walls of Antioch and sent his cavalry thundering toward the Crusader outpost. But Godfrey of Bouillon was ready. He met Zengis outside the city and routed his cavalry. That defeat humiliated the Muslims and shocked Europe. People gathered in church and sang songs about Godfrey's bravery. Historians wrote epic poems about his deeds. Godfrey might have been a war hero, but he never wanted to be one. He was a monk before he was a warrior, and he wanted to return to God, but his troops weren't ready to go home yet. And neither was a mercenary captain named Tancred, son of a duke from northern Italy. Tancred joined the First Crusade because his father forced him to. But along the way, he met some cool guys, like the aforementioned Godfrey. But Tancred didn't want to go back to Italy. No, he wanted to carve his own kingdom out of these wild lands. And since Godfrey was too busy trying to atone for his own sins to care about Tancred's little schemes, Tancred declared himself prince of a small area north of Antioch. But the Muslim princes of the region weren't keen on losing their land, so they hired Zengis back to kick out Tancred. And for a while it looked like the mercenaries were gonna win. The Christians were demoralized, the countryside was scorched. And Godfrey was hanging on by the slimmest of margins, and then his brother came. Baldwin II was the ruler of a small state in southern France. He'd been busy solidifying his power base there and had ignored the pleas of his brother to come help him. But now he was here and eager to prove himself. Baldwin led the Crusader army on a lightning strike offensive, pushing deep into the Muslim heartland and conquering cities as far away as Edessa and even briefly Aleppo. But Zengis was waiting for him. The vizier had taken over Aleppo and rebuilt his army. And outside the city of Ramla, he smashed the Crusader army and chased Baldwin back to Antioch. And all the while, Godfrey's health was deteriorating. He had wounds from battle that wouldn't heal and was constantly fatigued. He had come to believe that his call to the priesthood wasn't actually from God, but from his own pride and vainglory. Now, he was sick and about to die, and there was no one to comfort him, not his soldiers, who were licking their wounds, nor his detractors, who were chasing him from town to town. But then a young pilgrim named Pope Honorius II showed up outside the city with a simple message from God. Godfrey was forgiven. His doubts and regrets didn't matter. God wanted him to keep his crown. Finally able to forgive himself, Godfrey rallied his forces and got ready to fight. Across the Syrian desert, Zengis knew he had a problem. The Crusader army was regrouping and getting stronger by the day. And if he didn't do something soon, his vizier's reputation would be ruined forever. So he hatched a plan to lure the Crusaders out of their strongholds and trap them in the desert. He began by sending messengers to Godfrey demanding that the Crusaders surrender or get out of the Holy Land, but Godfrey was ready for this. He knew Zengis too well, he expected this move. And instead of taking the bait, he sent messengers of his own to Zengi, pretending to be scared and asking for mercy. Zengis fell for it. He took his entire army and marched toward Antioch, just as Godfrey predicted he would. And then he laid siege to the city. This time, Godfrey was prepared. Food was brought in and defenses were repaired. Days turned into weeks, and Zengi's army began to dwindle. The vizier knew he was trapped. So he ordered his men to dig tunnels underneath the walls and fill them with explosives. Then came the night of July 1st, 1126. The tunnels were complete and the vizier's men snuck into the Christian camp. Then they lit the fuses and fled. Massive explosions shook the earth. Antioch's walls collapsed. Its citizens fled into the countryside. The Crusader army survived, but barely. Many of them were injured and several thousand civilians were killed. It was a massacre. Godfrey was badly wounded and his brother Baldwin rushed to his aid. The two brothers rode to safety together, but it was clear Godfrey would never recover. With his last breath, he asked Baldwin to finish his work, to create a kingdom where people could live free of fear and persecution. Then he died. It took almost 2 decades, but eventually Baldwin fulfilled his brother's request. In 1143, a powerful Crusader state existed from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. It lasted less than 50 years, but in its heyday, it was bigger than France. For the moment, though, Baldwin had bigger problems. He needed to deal with this pesky vizier who had just destroyed his city, and so he did. In 1127, Baldwin and Zengis met outside the city of Aleppo in what might be the greatest battle in medieval history. Neither leader wanted to risk direct confrontation, so they maneuvered their armies into positions of advantage and traded blows for hours. Finally, Zengis panicked. His archers were running out of arrows and his cavalry was depleted. He ordered a full retreat, but his army didn't know that. They thought he was ordering them to charge. So Zengis ended up spending the night riding for his life as Christian cavalrymen hacked at his retreating soldiers. It was the death blow to Zengis's power base. He tried to rally his supporters, but one by one, they abandoned him. Too ashamed to admit they'd been beaten by the Crusaders, they pretended they never supported Zengis in the first place. Soon he was alone, wandering the Syrian desert with only a few followers. And then the Crusaders found him and killed him. Without Zengis, order broke down, entire regions fell into civil war. Local lords carved out their own territories. And Baldwin spent the next decade putting down rebellions and reasserting Crusader authority. He even managed to conquer Zengis' former capital at Mosul, and by the time he died in 1162, he'd proven himself a worthy successor to his brother. The kingdom of Jerusalem was secure, well, except for the part where the surrounding Muslim states were preparing to invade. But that's not important right now. What's important is that Baldwin was a saintly ruler who protected the weak and built hospitals and schools. He never wanted to be king, but he was a good one, that is until he wasn't. You see, Baldwin had a twin sister named Alice, and she hated her brother's guts. She lived in a castle near the coast, and every night she watched ships full of treasure sail by, sailing away from her grasp, all because she was a woman. Back in the old country, women couldn't inherit land, so Alice had been exiled from the kingdom with nothing but a bag of gold coins and a burning hatred for her brother. All she had left was revenge. In 1162, Baldwin died. Alice poisoned him, then she declared herself queen. But the people of Jerusalem weren't having it. They proclaimed Baldwin's nephew Amalric king. And though he was only 14, he ruled like a god over his people. He built schools and roads and even raised taxes on the Jews living in his kingdom. And his rule was so fair and just that even Alice respected him. When she died 5 years later, she bequeathed most of her fortune to the royal treasury. Maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found peace. Or maybe she was just giving her treasure to someone who deserved it more. Either way, the kingdom of Jerusalem flourished under the rule of Amalric and his successors. They built great universities and hospitals and cathedrals, and their armies fought valiantly against the Muslims who tried to push them into the sea. It was a golden age that lasted until the Mongols came, but that's a story for another day. Today, we have come to the end of our tale, so let us thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming to watch and listen to the tales we tell here. We bring you stories of history, myth, and everything in between. We hope you enjoy them all. Please make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. And until then, remember, history never gets old.